Well, so let's move on now to Libya, where what we're hearing and what we're seeing are two different things. President Obama says not only is the effort being led by other countries, France and Great Britain, but it will be passed off quickly. Well, we have seen 3 B-2 stealth bombers fly in from Missouri, more than a dozen American F-15 and F-16 fighter jets, 2 U.S. destroyers, 3 U.S. submarines, and 1 British submarine. And that was just over the weekend. It seems going in multilaterally means with the backing of other countries, but largely with the intelligence, the weapons, and the personnel from right here. We want to cover this today from a lot of different sides of this story, so we've brought in Seton Motley, president of Less Government, as well as Medea Benjamin, co-founder of the anti-war organization Code Pink. Let's just kind of start and get a feel for what you guys think about this. Should the U.S. be involved in any sense in Libya? Medea, I'll start with you.
Well, we should be involved in supporting movements for democracy around the world, and there are many ways to do that, but we shouldn't be involved militarily.
Yeah, there is no... The only vital national interest one could argue for is the small percentage of oil that Libya contributes to the world market. Beyond that, that does not justify, we have zero national interest in this. I would disagree with Medea to a point, which is we don't know who we're supporting on the other side. They're calling themselves a democracy movement because that helps them on their messaging worldwide. But we don't know who we're supporting and what we're going to get if and when the opposition succeeds and ousts.
I mean, why do you say that we don't know who we're supporting?
Because we don't know what they want to do once they oust Gaddafi.
So you're saying the strategy's not outlined right now?
Well, the strategy, their motives, their goals, their objectives, what they want to establish once they oust Gaddafi, we don't know any of that. We're just going in blindly and blithely, uninformed and poorly objected.
And I would say that it's one thing to support peaceful movements to overthrow repressive regimes. We saw what a beautiful thing that was in the case of Egypt, and we're seeing that in other countries as well. But this has turned into an armed struggle that looks very much like a civil war, and it looks like this is going to go on for a long time, and I think it's a big mistake to get involved in the middle of an armed conflict like that.
I would agree. I think the only reason we got lucky in places like Egypt is because Mubarak wasn't as big a thug as Gaddafi is. The worse the dictator is, the worse he's going to treat people trying to overthrow him. So in that sense, we just got lucky. Mubarak isn't as big a thug as Gaddafi is.
Well, I don't know about getting lucky. I think the Egyptian people came out in huge numbers, and every time there was the police attacking people, and a lot of people died. I mean, hundreds of people died in the case of Egypt. More and more people came out, and more people came out. I mean, I was there, being in the square with 1 million people. There comes a point when, if you have massive nonviolent civil disobedience, the leader has to step down, or almost has to step down. So
almost.
I
we
wonder,
got lucky.
Well, no, I wonder
They
what could have happened in Libya if it just kept growing as a nonviolent movement, kept growing and growing and growing. I mean, we won't never know that.
Well, they weren't afforded that opportunity because Gaddafi pulled out the guns rather quickly.
Certainly a different situation there. But speaking of that, Seton, I'm wondering why you think that the U.S. government chose to get involved here, but not, for example, in Bahrain, in Yemen, if we're talking about humanitarian aid, why not in Darfur?
If Barack Obama doesn't know, how the heck am I supposed to know why we got involved? We don't have any national interest. We don't have any tether to why we're doing this. Obama hasn't made clear why he's doing this. Speaking of what you said earlier, there's word today that 2,300 Marines from Camp Lejeune were just dispatched to Libya. That certainly sounds like a ground troop situation, which is not what we were told was going to happen. I don't fundamentally understand, from a national interest perspective, why we're getting in the middle of a civil war when we don't know what side we're supporting.
Well, the other thing also is, look what happens when the U.S. has gotten involved elsewhere. And we have 2 wars that are still going on. We just commemorated the 8th year of the war in Iraq, the very day that the U.S. started lobbing missiles into Libya. And I think it would have done well for Barack Obama and our ambassador Susan Rice and others to say, hey, wait a minute, aren't there some other ways that we can act other than violence?
Sort of an eerie similarity there. Medea, I know that Code Pink is very much against violence, but let's break this down. I mean, let's think about the state of our military today. Let's think back, for example, to another time when the economy was terrible, post-Great Depression, when the military it didn't cease to exist, but it was very weak because, frankly, they couldn't afford it. Is this an ideal situation for you, a time when, the U.S. can't afford to have a good military and therefore doesn't? Is that sort of idealistic to you, to not have to have a military?
Well, first of all, it's a terrible time for us because it's a financial crisis and people in this country are really suffering, and the kind of budget deficits that we see in every single state are hurting everyone from our teachers to our firefighters to our police. So there's nothing ideal about this time. And then in terms of the world stage, it's a terrible scene. But I think it's a time for us to really reevaluate where we're spending our money. We have, as Code Pink, already been pushing and saying, look, we cannot afford this kind of bloated military. Talk about small government. Let's look where the government is really big, and that is at the military. And so we feel like winding down the 2 wars that we're already in would have allowed us to save hundreds of billions of dollars. And now all of a sudden we turn around, and before we even knew it, we are spending about $150 million a day now on a new war that we never even had a chance to discuss.
What do you think, Seaton? I mean, you seem to be sort of against this involvement in Libya. Is this a time that you think that we should be making our military smaller?
I never want to make military decisions based upon domestic budgetary. If there's a legitimate national situation that requires military action, I'm not going to say, well, we can't afford it because we got to raise union dues. I'm not going to do that. If it's a national security issue, we got to hit it from a national security. We got to do it regardless of what the cost is, because the cost, if we lose something like that or let something like that slip, is quite dire. This may surprise Medea, but I was against nation building in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was for removing the governments and then leaving. So we wouldn't be 8 years in and 6 years in, respectively, in these 2 places.
Oh, but then why were you in favor of removing Saddam Hussein, but you're not in favor of removing Gaddafi?
Because Saddam Hussein was a legitimate threat to the United States.
Threat to the United States?
Yes.
Never threat to the United States. Had no weapons of mass destruction, never even threatened to attack the United States.
Well, yeah,
had nothing to do with 9/11.
He was attacking the United States every day.
Oh, come on.
The no-fly zones in the north and south.
Attacking the United States?
He was shooting at American jets.
American jets were there. He was not attacking the United States at all. Oh, come on. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Me. I would like you to ask the fighter pilots in question that were being shot at.
Why were the fighter pilots in somebody else's territory?
I think Medea is saying what was the purpose of going there beforehand? Was Saddam Hussein a threat to the United States before we went to war?
Well, again, there was global intelligence that pointed to that turned out to be inaccurate. I mean, the British had
No is the answer.
Well, but the fact of the matter is I wouldn't be there 6 years later. And I wouldn't have been there 6 months later.
That's what they told us then. They said 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, that would be the maximum.
Please do not ask me.
And I think that's what a lot of people are worried about with the situation in Libya also. But let's move on to just something that's happened even more recent, and that is in the last 24 hours what we're seeing between Israel and Palestine. Do you think, Seaton, if this escalates, if this violence, and we just had a guest on, Norman Finkelstein, who says he doesn't think it's going to escalate, but there are people a little bit concerned here. This is somewhat serious. Bombs are being dropped. If this escalates, will the U.S. support Israel? And do they have to?
I don't have any faith in Barack Obama supporting Israel, which is patently absurd. There's a Facebook page that's gone up today for the Third Intifada, and it's already got 65,000 likes. That's terrible. What we need to do is, these things end when there's decisive victory. Israel's been attacked in 4 wars and numerous skirmishes and now maybe 3 intifadas. They've won every one, but the world community has stopped them from winning decisively. What we need to do is let Israel be Israel, take them off the leash, allow them to win decisively, and these problems will end. They have the military capability to do it. They have the intelligence capability to do it.
What does that mean, to let Israel win decisively?
Well, they keep pulling up short. When they see all of...
They should have killed all the people in Gaza instead of just 1,400 of them.
Well, there's a lot more than 1,400 enemies, so yes, the answer is yes, they should have killed.
So you're saying that the U.S. should allow Israel, that the world should allow Israel to go demolish and kill all of Gaza?
Imagine if Canada was lobbing, since 2005, 10,000 rockets into upstate New York. At some point, wouldn't we want to go to war with Canada? They've launched more than 10,000 rockets into Gaza since Israel pulled out every single last Jew and settler out of the Gaza Strip. They've launched more than 10,000 rockets into Israel. Perhaps that would upset us if it were happening to us.
It would have also upset you if somebody came in and stole your land.
But they did. They gave them the land back, and since then they got 10,000 rockets launched.
The people in the West Bank do not have their land. The people in East Jerusalem, their land is being taken away from them every single day. The people in Gaza don't have the right to go in and out of their country. They don't have the right to airspace. They don't have the right to the sea area.
Wait. You
they
can't.
are in a virtual prison. And so if you ever want to see peace, it's not letting Israel off the leash, believe me. It's putting Israel on a leash. And it's allowing the Palestinians to have their human rights.
Without human rights.
Without justice,
there was no such thing as a Palestinian.
Look, if you were a person in Gaza, I don't think you would say you had your rights. You can't go in and out of your country. You can't have a business.
In 1967, 8 countries started a war with Israel. Israel won in 6 days. And they took the West Bank, they took Gaza, and they took the Golan Heights because they were being repeatedly attacked from there. You can't start a war, lose, and then bitch about how the map's drawn. Win the next war, you can draw the map any way you want. They took those territories because they were repeatedly attacked from them. They deserve to have them because they won them. They've given them back, which is beyond ridiculous in my estimation. Stop attacking them. Stop the Intifada. But prior to 67, there were no Palestinians. They were Jordanians, they were Egyptians, and they were Syrians. If this was such a humanitarian crisis for these 3 countries and these peoples, let Syria deal with them, let Jordan deal with them, let Egypt deal with them.
All right, Medea, I see you shaking your head over
here.
here.
You have to listen to this ridiculousness. I mean, I think the world knows that what Israel is doing is against international law.
So
the ongoing building of the settlements is against international law. The building of the apartheid wall is against international law. And keeping the people imprisoned in Gaza is against international law. Unless Israel starts abiding by international law and the Palestinians have justice, there will never be peace,
they
unfortunately.
Have justice.
And the U.S. should stop giving $3 billion a year to Israel to keep using to oppress the Palestinian people.
All right, unfortunately, we are out of time. Certainly an animated discussion. Started off with a lot of agreements, did not end that way. Code Pink co-founder Medea Benjamin and president of Less Government, Seton Motley.